It was never supposed to happen like that. The Red Keep burned hotter than dragonfire, smoke rising like a curse over the city. Civilians screamed in the streets, crushed under falling stone, their lives scattered like ash on the wind. The bells had rung. Surrender had been given. But Daenerys didn't care, and by the time Arya Stark pushed her way through the rubble and blood, she'd seen enough. She had a name left on her list, the last one, Cersei Lannister. Arya had tried to walk away from it. She told the Hound she wasn't going to die in King's Landing. But after watching the city burn, after watching women clutch babies with faces melted from dragonfire, something inside her snapped. Arya Stark wasn't just a girl with many faces anymore. She was vengeance shaped into a blade. She turned back. She didn't tell Sandor. He was already bleeding, bones breaking as the Red Keep crumbled. Arya just whispered a quiet thank you, then disappeared into the smoke. By the time she reached the map room where Cersei had fled, the Queen was alone. Jaime hadn't made it. The rubble blocked his path somewhere in the crypts below, and Cersei stood under the cracked ceiling, staring up at the painted map of Westeros, as if willing it to remember her. She looked smaller than Arya remembered. No golden armor, no smirk, just a woman, a mother, a queen without a crown. But Arya didn't flinch. Cersei turned, eyes wide. "You," she said, like someone seeing a ghost. And maybe she was. "You don't belong here," Cersei hissed, backing toward the broken steps. "You're just another Stark girl playing dress-up with killers." Arya didn't speak. She stepped forward, unsheathing her dagger, the one that had once been meant for Bran, the one that killed the Night King. She had used it to end death once. Now she was using it to deliver it. Cersei tried to run, tried to beg, tried to reason, but Arya had learned long ago that power didn't beg, it manipulated. Cersei had manipulated enough, lied enough, burned enough. When the blade entered her chest, right beneath the ribs, Cersei gasped like she'd never expected it, like death was something that happened to other people. Arya held her as she fell, not out of mercy, but because she wanted to see it, the exact moment the lioness stopped breathing. "I want you to know," Arya whispered in her ear, "this isn't for me. This is for the little girl you orphaned when you killed Ned Stark. For every peasant you crushed under your heel, for all the lives that ended while you smiled from your throne." Cersei's eyes blinked slowly. She was still trying to speak, blood rising to her lips. Then she stopped. And that was it. No prophecy, no collapse of the Red Keep, no poetic tragedy with Jaime dying in her arms, just a girl and a dagger. Arya stood alone over the Queen's body, listening to the dying city outside. Somewhere above, the screams of Daenerys' victims echoed through the wind. She wondered if Jon was still fighting to save his honor, or if he too had lost something. In the fire, she stepped over the body and left the way she came, like a shadow. The next morning the whispers began, that the Queen of Ashes had died not in glory, but on the point of Stark steel, that Arya Stark had struck down the Lion Queen before the Red Keep even fell, and with that the wheel didn't just break, it shattered. They found the body at dawn. Qyburne's remains were still smouldering nearby, his head caved in from the mountain's last act of defiance. But it was Queen Cersei's corpse that stopped the Unsullied in their tracks. She was laid out like someone had placed her there with care, eyes shut, hands folded, blood drying across her gown like a final insult. No rubble crushed her, no poetic end with a lover, just death, clean and intentional. Grey Worm was the first to inspect the wound. He knew this kind of kill. Swift, personal, precise. This wasn't the work of a building or a dragon. This was someone who got close. Someone who wanted her to feel it. That news didn't take long to reach Daenerys. She stood on the half-destroyed balcony, looking out over the corpse of King's Landing like it was a prize. The wind carried ash like snow, but she stood untouched by it. glowing in that way only conquerors do, just long enough for people to believe she had been right all along. Then Grey Worm whispered it in her ear. Arya Stark killed Queen Cersei. The fire in Daenerys's eyes dimmed, not because she mourned Cersei. No, that woman had been a problem from the beginning. But because the death wasn't hers. She had wanted Cersei's blood as a warning, as a message, as a crown jewel in her path to ultimate fear. Instead, it had been taken by a girl who wasn't even supposed to be there. A Stark. Again. She remembered Jon, the man who still called. A queen, but looked at her like she was the Mad King's ghost. She remembered Sansa, who never bent the knee and never would, and now Arya, who walked through fire and death and stole Daenerys's final justice. This wasn't vengeance anymore. This was insult. Arya didn't wait for anyone's approval. By the time Dany had begun planning how to spin the news to her army, Arya was already halfway to the north side of the city, her horse caked in soot, her face grim as death. She didn't ride like a victor. She didn't smile. She just wanted to leave, but the city wouldn't let her. Word spread like wildfire through the ruins. People whispered her name with awe, with fear. Some called her the Queen Slayer. Others said she was the real Blade of Justice, not the Dragon Queen. There were mothers who cried for the children Daenerys had burned, and who now looked at Arya as something more than just a girl. She was retribution. But not everyone saw it that way. Jon found her near the edge of a half-demolished alley, trying to gather herself before the Unsullied arrived. He had blood on his hands too, but his heart bled more. "Arya," he said, voice low. She didn't turn right away. "Don't say it." He stepped closer. "You killed her." "She deserved it," Arya said, finally facing him. "You saw what she did. To father, to the city. I gave her a better death than she earned." Jon sighed. "That's not your decision to make." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Was it yours when you let her kill thousands yesterday and said nothing?" The silence between them was heavier than any sword. Jon had no answer. He had watched Daenerys rain fire on innocents, and he had stood still, heart torn between love and morality. "Arya," he said again, more carefully, "you've made yourself a target." Arya gave a crooked smile. "Let her come. If the Dragon Queen wants me dead for killing a tyrant, she'll have to look me in the eyes while she does it." Jon looked into those cold grey eyes and felt something he couldn't place. Admiration or dread. Maybe both. But Arya wasn't finished. "I didn't do it for the North or for you. I did it because she needed to die and no one else had the guts to finish it." He didn't argue. He couldn't. Behind them the streets stirred. Daenerys' soldiers were coming. Arya's name was in the wind, and power was shifting faster than anyone could control. The Game of Thrones wasn't over. It had just changed. Players. And Arya Stark was no longer just a girl with a list. She was the spark that might burn the dragon. They came for her at night. Arya had taken shelter in a half-destroyed tavern on the city's edge. The kind of place that once served gold cloaks and smugglers alike. Now it was just ash and broken barrels, with rats scurrying between cracks in the stone. She didn't sleep. She just sat, sharpening her dagger, waiting. She heard them long before they reached her. The footsteps of Unsullied were quiet, disciplined. But Arya knew the sound of soldiers who were trained not to speak, who moved with purpose but not with rage. They didn't come to kill. Not yet. They came to take. Arya stepped into the middle of the room and waited. The lead soldier pointed his spear. "The Queen commands your presence." Arya's jaw clenched. She said nothing but nodded. There was no point in running, not here, not yet. They marched her through the ruins of King's Landing. No chains, no bindings, just the threat of 100 spears, and the knowledge that Daenerys Targaryen had become a queen who didn't forget slights. The city was still smoldering. Children cried in the alleys. Smoke curled from buildings like ghosts still mourning. The people watched as Arya passed. Some looked away in fear. Others met her eyes with quiet nods, small, hidden acknowledgments of what she had done, of what she meant now. They brought her to the remains of the throne room, or what was left of it. The great hall was cracked in half, the roof torn apart by Drogon's fury. The Iron Throne still stood, somehow untouched, jagged, cruel, and laughing in the face of everything broken around it. And on its steps stood Daenerys. She wore black and red, no crown, just a flame-stitched cloak that trailed behind her. Like dragon wings, her eyes burned, not with sadness, but with a cold, offended calm. "You killed her," she said. No greeting, no title, just accusation. Arya didn't bow. "She earned it." Daenerys stepped forward. "She was mine to deal with." Arya's voice was flat. "And what would you have done? Burned her alive while she begged for mercy? You already burned the rest of the city." Dany's lips twitched. "You think you're a hero." "I think I did what needed to be done," Arya said, "without making orphans out of 10,000 children." The Unsullied stiffened at that, but Dany raised a hand. "You broke order," she said. "You took justice into your own hands. That's not how peace is built." Arya tilted her head. "You burned a city after it surrendered. Don't. Talk to me about peace." Silence. Then Daenerys' eyes narrowed. "What should I do with you, Arya Stark?" Arya didn't blink. "Try to kill me, and see how fast the North turns against you. Sansa won't kneel. Jon's already breaking inside. You think fear makes you queen, but all you've done is plant rebellion in every corner of Westeros." Dany's face changed. For a moment the fury cracked. The fear inside her, the desperate need to be seen as righteous, began to bleed through. "You're not a queen," Arya continued, stepping closer. "You're just the last Targaryen playing at fire, hoping no one notices how cold you really are." The tension broke like glass. Dany descended the steps slowly, fire in her breath, but her voice stayed level. "Leave King's Landing, now. Go north, east, I don't care where. If I see your face again, it will be the last time." Arya smirked. "You'll see my face again when it's the last thing you see." It was a threat, a promise, and a warning. Arya turned and walked out, unescorted, like no one could stop her, because no one could. But as she stepped back into the streets, the air felt different, not just heavy, charged, because she wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a symbol of defiance, of the fire Daenerys couldn't burn. And deep inside the Red Keep, behind the smile Daenerys forced onto her face, a seed of fear had been planted. Arya Stark had drawn blood from the Queen's grip on power, and blood always demands more. The Raven reached Winterfell 2 days later. Snow clung to its wings, but it carried words heavier than any storm. Sansa read the scroll by firelight, her expression tightening with every line. Arya had done it, killed Queen Cersei, not in the shadows, not with poison or whispers, but with her own hand, in the ruins of the Red Keep under Daenerys' reign. Sansa knew her sister well enough to understand what that meant. Arya wasn't trying to start a war, but she just might have. Brienne stood nearby, jaw tense. "This puts us in a dangerous place, my lady." Sansa folded the letter carefully. "We've always been in a dangerous place. The difference is now, Daenerys knows it too." She turned to her. "War Council, men of the North. Men who'd lost families in the burning of King's Landing. There was no love for Targaryens here, only silence and the low, simmering hum of distrust." "She told Arya to leave the city," Sansa said, "but we all know what that means. She's marked now, and if Arya is hunted, then so are the rest of us. Lord Glover grunted. The Dragon Queen thinks fear will hold Westeros together, but fear only lasts until the first blade draws blood. Sansa's voice dropped. Then maybe it's time we remind her the North is not afraid. Meanwhile, Arya didn't go north. She vanished, truly, this time. No one knew where she went. Some said she slipped onto a ship, heading west beyond the maps. Others swore they saw her riding through dawn, face cloaked, eyes hard. The truth was, Arya became exactly what she'd trained to be, a myth, a ghost. And as her story spread, so did unrest. Riots broke out in the capital, quiet at first, then loud. People carved her name into burnt walls. They whispered of the girl who killed the queen. To the broken, the grieving, the ones who'd lost everything to Dragonfire, Arya Stark was justice. The kind no crown could give. Jon Snow felt it most. He stayed in the capital beside Daenerys, but every time he looked at her, something in him twisted. She had won. She had sat on the Iron Throne. But the price. It was written in ash across his soul. "You're quiet," Daenerys said one night as they stood on the tower overlooking the blackened skyline. "I'm always quiet," Jon muttered, avoiding her gaze. "You don't agree with what I did." He hesitated. "I don't know what's right anymore." Daenerys reached for his hand, but he didn't take it. "Arya is your family, and she's a murderer." "So are you," Jon said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Silence. Heavy, sharp. "You think I enjoyed it?" Dany asked, voice cracking. "Do you think I wanted this?" "You chose it." "She chose chaos," Daenerys snapped. "She defied me, undermined my rule. I gave her a chance to walk away." Jon finally looked at her. "You don't give people chances, Dany. You give them commands." For a moment something ugly flickered in her eyes, something closer to the Mad King than Jon wanted to admit. "You still love me," she said, almost daring him to deny it. Jon looked away. "I loved who you were." And that was the beginning of the end, because even Daenerys, in all her confidence and fury, knew what that meant. Arya hadn't just killed Cersei. She'd broken the illusion. She'd made people see that power wasn't sacred, that queens could bleed. And once people saw that, they'd never unsee it. Far to the east, in the shadows of broken keeps and shattered armies, old allies began to stir. Yara Greyjoy spoke openly of secession. The Dornish prince stopped sending ravens. Even the Reach began murmuring about the Fire Queen losing her grip. All while the North waited, Winterfell had closed its gates. Sansa sent no reply to Daenerys' letters. She gathered men. She spoke to bannermen with cold certainty. She spoke of independence, not as a dream, but as a declaration. And somewhere, in the wind, Arya listened. She knew war was coming. She hadn't meant to start it, but she would damn well finish it. It was the dead of night when the raven from Dragonstone arrived. Sansa didn't open it immediately. She knew what it would say. Veiled threats wrapped in pretty words, like silk hiding a blade. Daenerys didn't ask. She commanded, and the North had stopped following commands long ago. When she finally cracked the seal, it was exactly what she expected. Arya Stark is to be considered a rogue element. Her presence near any major stronghold will be seen as an act of treason against the crown. The Queen expects the North's cooperation in bringing her to justice. Failure to comply will be interpreted as rebellion. Sansa read the last line, twice, then folded the parchment and threw it into the fire. "She thinks we'll give up our own," she said, voice low, almost amused. "She thinks we're like the rest of them." Brienne stood at her side, face unreadable. "She's scared." "She should be." Sansa turned to her council. The banners were already being raised across the north. Houses that had once doubted her now sent their finest men, old soldiers, wolf-born, fighters who still remembered what it meant to kneel to no one. There was no shouting in the hall, just grim understanding. The North was going to war again, but it wasn't just war, it was personal now. Meanwhile, Arya resurfaced, not in the North, not even in Westeros, but on the rocky shores of the Vale, cloaked in grey, face hidden beneath a hood. She travelled under a false name, slipped into taverns, and watched people talk about her like she was legend. The Queen Slayer, they whispered, the girl who stared a dragon in the face and didn't blink. Arya never corrected them. She just listened. She didn't trust anyone anymore, not even the lords who toasted her name, not the sellswords who offered allegiance. Every friendly smile could be a knife from Daenerys, every whisper could lead to her death. But the people, the common ones, they believed. They didn't care about crowns or bloodlines, they cared about survival. And when their children had burned in the fires of King's Landing, it wasn't Cersei they blamed. It was the Dragon Queen. Arya felt the weight of it every time a mother grabbed her hand in secret. Every time a soldier bowed and said, "For the North." She never asked for loyalty, but she was getting it anyway. And the more it grew, the more Daenerys unraveled. Back in the Red Keep, her council fractured. Tyrion had stopped attending her meetings. Davos had returned to the North quietly. Even Jon, her supposed ally, was withdrawing, not with rebellion but with distance. Every time he looked at her, it was like he saw a reflection he couldn't bear to face. She still had Drogon, still had the Unsullied, still had the throne. But power without love was a lonely thing. And Arya Stark had become loved in a way Daenerys never would be. One night Jon stood at the window of his chambers, watching the torches flicker below. Davos entered quietly. "She's slipping," Davos said. Jon didn't answer. "She's starting to hear whispers of Arya being seen in the Vale. She's furious, says Sansa is hiding her, says Winterfell is provoking her." Jon turned. "Is she wrong?" Davos sighed. "Does it matter? If she believes it, she'll act on it. And when dragons act, people die." Jon clenched his fists. "I should have stopped her before King's Landing. I should have—" "You were in love," Davos said gently. "That blinds even the best of us." But Jon's voice broke, then quiet and low. "I'm not blind anymore." It was the closest thing to a decision he'd made in weeks. And outside the castle, in the darkness beyond the gates, Arya watched from a rooftop. She had made it this far, past soldiers, through flames, across sea and mountain. Now she watched her brother, the man who once bent the knee, the man who died for the North, and she wondered if he still had it in him to do what had to be done. Because soon the fire would come north. And the only way to stop a dragon was with a wolf. The snows came early that year, not the soft kind that blanketed the ground in peace, but the biting, icy kind that howled like a warning. Winter had come back to Winterfell, and with it the unmistakable scent of war. Sansa stood atop the battlements, her red hair whipping in the wind. Below, soldiers trained in the courtyard, archers, spearmen, sword fighters, even wildlings who had come down from the wall to answer the call. She hadn't summoned them. They came on their own. Word had spread. The Dragon Queen was preparing to move north, and Arya's blood was the price. "She's testing us," Sansa said to Brienne, "pushing just far enough to make us blink." Brienne nodded. "And when we don't, she'll burn the rest. She wants to make an example of us." Sansa turned her eyes to the horizon. "But she's going to learn what happens when you corner wolves." In the Great Hall, Maester Vulcan brought the latest reports. Dragonstone was mobilizing. Daenerys had summoned new ships from the Iron Fleet, forced Yara Greyjoy into reluctant support. Half of the Reach was crumbling under her influence. The rest stayed silent. Jon had not returned. But the most disturbing report came last. Raven from the Vale, the Maester said, voice trembling. It claims Arya Stark was seen in the Mountains of the Moon, alive, armed and not alone. Sansa's breath caught. Not alone. They say she's gathering people, fighters. Some call her a rebel, others a liberator. Sansa's face darkened. She's becoming the symbol Dany feared most. That night, Sansa wrote no letters, no calls for aid. She simply sat at her father's old chair and remembered. Ned Stark had once been called a traitor by a mad king, too, and all it took was one swing of a sword to change the course of history. Arya was walking the same line now, but she didn't kneel like Ned. She fought. Far to the south, in a dimly lit chamber of the Red Keep, Daenerys stood in front of a war table. Her fingers hovered over carved models, Winterfell, the airy, white harbour. Her face was stone. She's rallying people to her, she said. The Starks are provoking a civil war. Tyrion leaned against the table, drained. Maybe they don't want war. Maybe they just want to live without being ruled by fear. Dany's eyes flashed. No one wanted fear until the people they loved burned. I brought peace, and they spit in my face for it. Grey Worm stood silent behind her, ever loyal. Tyrion hesitated. If you attack the north, you'll lose everything. The realm is already splintered. You'll burn your crown just to keep it. Daenerys smiled, not kindly. Then I will sit on the ashes and wear it like a god. And that's when Jon walked in. His armor was plain, dark, and the stark black, his sword, Longclaw, strapped to his side. There was something in his eyes Daenerys hadn't seen in a long time. Resolve. Don't do this, he said. Don't march on Winterfell. They're harboring your sister, she said. Your family defies me. They're my family, Jon said, jaw clenched. And they've bled more for this realm than anyone. If you raise your dragon against them, you'll lose me. The words hung like a blade over her throat. Daenerys stepped toward him slowly, voice trembling. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. You said you loved me. I did. His voice broke. And I still want to believe you can be more than this. But if you make me choose between you and the North... He paused. You won't like who I pick. Tyrion closed his eyes. The game had shifted, and the Queen realized for the first time she might not be able to win it. But pride was the last thing to burn. That night Arya crossed the borders of the Riverlands with 30 riders, all nameless, all fierce. Not an army, a message. She carried no banners, no titles, only a dagger. She rode not for glory, but for Winterfell, for the last war, and in the distance the roar of wings echoed across the sky. The dragon had begun its flight north. They saw the dragon before they heard it, a shadow cast across the snow-covered fields of Winterfell, growing larger by the second. The flapping of wings stirred the wind, whipped it into a frenzy that shook banners loose from their poles. People ran. Children were ushered into the crypts. Soldiers grabbed bows that suddenly felt useless in their hands. Drogon was coming, and on his back, wrapped in blackened fire, was Daenerys Stormborn. Sansa stood on the battlements, cloak billowing, eyes sharp. She didn't move, didn't flinch. She wanted Daenerys to see her there, unafraid, unbroken. She's not here to talk, Brienne said behind her. No, Sansa replied. She's here to make a spectacle. And she was right. The dragon circled once, its roar splitting the sky, then landed with a thunderous crash outside the gates. Soldiers scattered like ants. The ground shook, but the gates of Winterfell didn't open. Daenerys stepped down alone. No unsullied, no guards, just her. It was meant to be a show of power. One woman and a dragon, coming to demand submission. But the North didn't bend. It never bent. Jon met her at the gates. He'd arrived a day earlier, riding hard, trying to stop what was already in motion. His face was haggard. His words came heavy. This isn't the way. Daenerys didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the walls, where Sansa watched like a ghost from the past. "She's hiding Arya," Dany said, voice low but laced with steel. "And she's calling it honor. She's protecting her own, like any Stark would. Your sister murdered a queen. She saved the realm from another tyrant," Jon snapped. That cut deep. Her jaw tightened. "You're defending rebellion. I'm defending my family. And you're standing in front of the North alone, because even your army didn't believe this was a good idea." She turned to face him now. "I have Drogon, and that's all you have." Silence. Drogon growled low, sensing tension. One wrong move, and fire would coat the gates. But then the main doors creaked open, not from fear, but from defiance. Sansa walked out slowly, flanked by Brienne and several northern guards. She stopped beside Jon, her breath misting in the cold air. "You've come a long way," Sansa said, "just to die at our doorstep." Daenerys' eyes narrowed. "Hand over Arya. She's not here." "You lie." "I do," Sansa said plainly, "because you don't deserve the truth." Dany stepped forward. "Do you know what I could do to this place? With one command, I could—" "You already did," Sansa interrupted. "To King's Landing, to children, to the people you claimed to free." "She was my enemy." "She was a mirror," Sansa said, eyes hard, "and Arya shattered it before you could see yourself." Jon looked between them, the woman he had loved, and the sister who had become more queen than any dragon could ever birth. "You're standing on the soil of the North," he said to Daenerys. "This is your chance to walk away. Take it." Daenerys glanced up at the towers of Winterfell, the battlements lined with archers, the courtyards full of soldiers who had no fear left in them. They weren't professionals, they weren't paid, they were northerners, and they would die for this land before they let it burn again. Then came a sound from the trees behind them, hoofbeats, dozens. Arya emerged from the forest trail, seated on a dark horse, flanked by the riders she'd gathered from the Vale. She rode up slowly, her face calm, unreadable. Daenerys turned at the sound, and for the first time her confidence cracked. "You came," she said coldly. Arya dismounted. "Of course I did. You threatened my family. You murdered a queen. You murdered thousands. I just—" started the Count. Dany stepped closer, Drogon shifting uneasily. "I should burn you where you stand." Arya didn't blink. "Then do it." The challenge hung heavy in the air. Arya stepped forward until she stood within arm's reach of the Dragon Queen. "Kill me," Arya said, "but know this. I'm not the threat anymore. You are." Sansa raised a hand from behind, and suddenly the gates of Winterfell opened. Wider, revealing more soldiers, more archers, more wolves. Not an army against a queen, a kingdom. One heartbeat passed, two. Then Daenerys looked around and saw what she had become. Not a savior, not a liberator, just a queen surrounded by enemies and utterly, completely alone. She turned, mounted Drogon, and flew away. No words, no threats, just retreat. The war wasn't over, but it had changed. Arya looked up at the sky, watching the dragon disappear into the clouds, and said quietly, "She'll be back." Sansa answered without looking, "Then we'll be ready." Winter held its grip a little tighter in the weeks that followed. The dragon hadn't returned, not yet, but the sky was watched day and night. Ravens circled like omens, and every breath drawn by the people of Winterfell came with the unspoken question, what will Daenerys do now? Arya didn't stay inside the walls. She kept to the woods, the fields, the quiet places where war brews before it explodes. She trained, she waited, she listened. In her silence, she became something bigger than herself, not just a name on a queen's list, but a legend whispered by the desperate, the girl who stood against fire. But Arya didn't feel like a legend. She felt tired. One night, John, he found her alone on the Godswood Trail. The weirwood trees loomed around them like silent witnesses. "You did it," he said. Arya looked at him. "What did I do?" "You showed her she could bleed." She shook her head. She already knew that. She just didn't want anyone else to know. John sat beside her, snow crunching beneath his weight. "You scared her." "She'll come back," Arya said. "Not with fire, with something worse. Something worse. Poison, spies, a crown wrapped in smiles." John looked down. "And you'll kill her?" Arya didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was low. "Only if I have to." They sat there for a long time, two children of the North, who had seen too much, done too much, become too much. "I can't follow her," John finally admitted. "You never could," Arya replied. He nodded. "But I don't know how to fight her without becoming what I hate." Arya looked over at him. "Then don't fight her. End it." John didn't speak again that night, but something changed in his eyes. Far away on Dragonstone, Daenerys sat alone in her war chamber. She stared at the carved map, the cracks, the lines, the places that defied her. She didn't speak. She didn't rage. She just breathed. Slow, controlled. She was unraveling, but not in fire. In thought. Tyrion had vanished. Varys was long, dead. Grey Worm watched her like a weapon on a leash. Even Drogon seemed to understand her silence. The empire she had built, with blood and passion and dragons, was becoming a tomb around her. And somewhere deep inside, the old whisper returned, "Burn them all." But she didn't act. Not yet. It was John who crossed the sea next. Alone. No banners, no armies. Just a Stark with a name that had once mattered more than a crown. He walked into Dragonstone like a man walking into a storm, and Daenerys met him. No guards, no blade, just silence between them like a canyon. "You came to kill me?" she asked. John looked at her. "I came to end this." She waited. "So what? Will it be? Your sword, a dagger like your sister's?" "No," John said. "Your choice." She tilted her head, mocking. "You want me to step down, to give the world back to the lords and kings who've ruined it for centuries?" "I want you to live," John said, "but not like this, not as a queen everyone fears and no one loves." She laughed, bitter, cold. "You want me to go?" Quietly. "I want you to remember who you were before the fire, before the throne. You believed in something once." She looked away. For a moment something flickered. Pain, maybe, regret, but then the walls went back up. "It's too late." "No," John said. "It's only too late if you make it so." And then he stepped forward and handed her something. A scroll from Sansa. It read, "This isn't surrender. It's mercy. Step down. Leave Westeros. Let history remember you as the queen who chose peace when she had power, or stay and die alone." Daenerys read it in silence. Her hands trembled, and for the first time she realized what Arya had truly done. She had made her choose, fear or legacy, fire or forgiveness. In the end, Daenerys left. No one knew where she went. She took Drogon and vanished into the east. Some say she went mad. Others say she found peace in a land far from the greed of Westeros. But she never returned, and that was enough. Arya never settled. She rode west, past the edge of the maps, chasing something no one could name. Sansa ruled the north, not as queen of rebels, but as a woman who had seen too much fire to ever bow again. Jon returned to the wall, where snow buried his regrets, and duty was the only thing left untouched. The realm healed, slowly, unevenly, with scars that never truly faded. But people remembered the girl who killed a queen, the queen who lost herself to fire, and the wolf who walked away from it all, because sometimes the greatest power isn't sitting on the throne. It's walking away from it.